right, so I need a volunteer, someone tell me, this is what's great about this activity. You get to tell me what's odd about someone else. You get to rat someone out.
Oh my God.
So stand up, tell us who you are and what's odd about that other person.
I'm Stacy, and I met, is it here? Over here, and you're Peter, possibly.
All right. So I understood that the theme of your conference was encouragement. So Brianna and I brought some chocolate-covered mints, and they're now encouragements. They're not bad for you. They have no calories or anything bad. So you get an encouragement. Someone else. Tell us who you are.
I'm Evelyn, and I found out that I found a woman with bigger feet than mine.
I so want to know how big their feet are. And yet I know my grandmother would want to spank me if I asked the question. So we'll say, well done. I'm going to ask them later, just so you know. Another person.
I met Francis.
Well, tell us who you are.
Oh,
stand up. Hi, Sue.
I'm sorry. And I met Francis, who is forgetful.
Oh, that's not odd.
That's not what's most unusual about Francis.
Who didn't see, that wasn't a one she tried to give him. That was $100 bill. Francis will be buying coffee for people later.
That knows her secret.
And I think Paul just volunteered to go next because.
I'm not going to tell on her.
No, you met other people. Go ahead, stand up, Paul.
Go ahead, tell it.
Go ahead. I met you, but I forgot your name already.
I'm Karen.
Karen, that's right. I'm so sorry. And Karen is agoraphobic.
I am agoraphobic.
Agoraphobic. Isn't that interesting?
You'll be Googling it tonight, won't you?
She has a type of claustrophobia that's about spaces, I think.
Spaces and people.
Spaces and people.
Yes.
The Roman Agora, the big shopping center in Rome, is where agoraphobic is.
Yes.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yes. And I am agoraphobic, which is odd. I mean, not necessarily that's odd, but it's odd given what I do for a living because I am with people in small spaces 40, 60 hours a week. And so, yeah, I'm odd, and it's okay. Now, does anyone else want to go?
No.
Go ahead. He wants a chocolate.
That's all right. I'm Kevin, and I met Nate, and he turns license plates into acronyms, makes acronyms out of license plates.
Give us an example.
Okay, so like in California there will be like 3 letters that will be in a sequence, and I'll see the letters like J, K, L after another, and I'll be like, it'll take me just a few seconds to come up with like just kick Larry or something.
Do we have a Larry in here?
Do you think about that when you go to bed at night?
Okay. Good. All right. So some of you have enjoyed this because your secret is still safe, and some of you have been very eager to share other people's secrets. But let me just ask you, why do you think I had you do this?
To loosen us up.
Oh, sure. Sure. But why else?
So that we know we're all at.
Wow. What is your name? Fran. I'm gonna say two things. Francis needs better friends. And I'll ask you that again. What's your name? Barbara. If you needed me to tell you that you were all odd, we'll just leave that sentence hanging. Sue? Stay. Oh, so close.
You want me to answer the question?
If that's. What am I going to do with this crowd? The question is, why did I have you do this?
I think because you wanted us to approach other people and see that the actual doing it wasn't as bad as what's in our head here involved.
That could absolutely be why I had you do it. All of your answers are fine, but actually the activity was unimportant. It's the 4 or 5 of you that volunteered to rat out your friends. Because whether you realize it or not, when Stacy and Paul and Francis and Kevin stood up and said, so-and-so is odd, they were speaking publicly. Weren't you? This is public. There's more than 2 or 3 of you. It's not a private conversation. You got up, you followed the directions, you told us what you needed to tell us, and then you sat down. And you all survived. And you all survived. And those of you who, what is your name in the red shirt? Darvis. And Darvis, who raised his hand and said, I don't like public speaking, he didn't volunteer, but he was laughing as loud as the rest of you at poor Francis. So we've learned 2 things already, and you didn't even know you were learning. You learned that you can get up and speak in front of people. It's not a big deal. And you've learned that when the audience is on your side, there's really not that much to worry about, right? Your audience is every bit as important, as we'll talk about later in the public speaking event, as you are. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. Your audience is the most important part of public speaking, and we'll talk about that a little later. Brianna, can you give me a little tissue or a napkin or something? I am roasting hot.
We'll get you a little air.
Thank you. Can I open this door?
They'll get it. Okay. That might make you feel better.
Okay. I wouldn't worry so much, except I'm a woman and I'm vain and they're videotaping, so I put makeup on for you and it'll all be gone if I don't get a little fan. So we know that public speaking is possible. We know that being a good audience member is part of it, so now you'll remember when your pastors are speaking on Sunday to pay attention. Give them a little smile, laugh at their jokes, regardless of if they're funny. Right? Are some of you pastors? Wouldn't you appreciate that from your congregation? Yeah. I'm on your side. So, we're going to talk a little bit. We know we can speak publicly. We're going to talk a little bit about organizing a speech, right? And I think I gave a handout. I think there's something in your. And what I did is I gave you a little fill in the blanks for a little audience interaction. Thank you. Thank you. Is there a page number? Page 21? Okay. And I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to hope I remember what I've got there. So there are 3 parts to any speech. Do you know this?
No.
You didn't know that? Now I'm going to tell you.
Different lineups, so yours is different.
It probably would be.
Yeah.
It probably would
We
be.
do a sermon, right?
Oh. It probably isn't that much different, actually, when you're given a sermon. Oh, I have my tea. Oh, thanks. Okay. I bet if we sat down, we'd find out that they're actually very, very similar. But there's 3 parts to any speech. There's the introduction, the beginning. There's the body. There's the conclusion. You open it up. You tell them what you're going to tell them. You tell them what you're going to tell them. That's the introduction. The body is you tell them. The conclusion is you tell them what you told them. That's a speech. It's pretty simple. But I have some little fill in the blanks there. So what's the first thing?
Page 21, everyone.
Page 21, everyone. Oh, you're already there. Okay. In your first blank, the answer there is the introduction. What's the question? What's the statement?
There are 4 specific, the first section of the outline is the introduction.
The first section of an outline is an introduction. And in that introduction, you need to do 4 things, right? You need to grab the attention of your audience. I'm not giving a traditional speech right now, am I? I'm giving more of a lecture or a presentation. But when I started the lecture or presentation, I got your attention by telling you my association with Open Doors, right? And we developed a connection, you and I. I gave you a reason to want to listen to me because I'm involved. I love Open Doors. Even though I met someone in the restroom who's been involved with Open Doors before Open Doors or something for like 13 years or something. Their church has been working with persecuted Christians before she got involved here. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get the audience's attention. You're going to give them a reason to listen to you, right? Then you're going to tell them what you're talking about. We call that a thesis statement. So in your case, when you're talking about bridge builders, when you're talking about the church, when you're talking about persecuted Christians, your thesis statement is going to be pretty simple. Today I'm going to talk to you about persecuted Christians. How easy is that? Now, why do I tell you to make a simple thesis statement? You didn't know I'd be asking serious questions. You thought it was all going to be fun and laughs and big feet and stuff like that. But who just raised their hand? Stacy.
So that they know what you're going to talk about.
So that they know what you're going to talk about. How many of you are married? How many of you ever had a conversation with your spouse where you didn't know what you're talking about?
Me or her?
Either. How many of you at the end of said conversation that turned into some kind of argument and slam doors of sorts, when you finally calmed down and settled down and realized what you were talking about, said, well, why didn't you just tell me that? Tell the truth, shame the devil. You're missing a thesis statement. So when you are in a public presentation or a classroom or church or a sermon and you don't know what they're talking about, it's because they haven't told you what they're talking about. The thesis statement. If you want your audience to know what you're talking about, tell them. But that's fair too, by the way. Then you're both on the same page. So you need a thesis statement. What do I have next? Am I going in the right order? Someone who's... Okay.
Why they should listen.
Why are we credible?
Why should they listen? So your audience is often going to be church people, right? In America. With air conditioning and Bibles and a band and freedom that they probably appreciate. Why should they listen to you? Because they've got something that so many other people do not have, right? So why should they listen? Why are you listening to me? Because I told you about a 17-year-old boy who told me about persecuted Christians. 6 years after my student told me about Open Doors, and I said, nice. He gave me a reason to listen, right? He was credible. There was something about his persuasion, his performance. So when you go in and you start a speech and you tell him, I'm going to talk to you about persecuted Christians, and this is why you should listen. right? And then you're going to tell them what you're talking about. That's called a preview of main points, right? So, oh, you're going to give me a copy of the notes? Oh, and another fan. Yay! My life is so easy. And I lost my place. A preview of main points. Now, for some of your speeches, you're going to have one main point. It's going to be, I want to tell you about open doors, right? For some of you, you might break it down into 2 or 3 points. I'm going to talk to you about open doors ministry, but I'm going to talk to you specifically about a church in China, right? Now, the reason why you preview your speech is for a couple reasons. There are a couple, well, I should probably work on my grammar. There are a couple reasons why you might want to preview your speech. People like to know where things are going, right? How many of you are old enough to miss maps? You're now stuck with GPS and MapQuest, and you really miss maps. I miss maps. You know why I miss maps? Because on a map, I saw where I was going. Right? I'd get a little colored pencil and I'd and erase it because I went to the wrong place, and then, right? But I could do the whole map in yellow and always find where I was going and where I had come from. GPS, I got a new car in January, and one of the selling points was this GPS thing. Can I work it? No. My daughter can work it. When she's in the car and she works it, do I know how to follow the directions? No. Because it doesn't tell me, it only gives me a little bit at a time, and it makes me crazy. I want to know where I'm going. I want to know what I'm looking for. I want to know that I found it once I got there. And GPS doesn't do it for me. A preview is a map. It tells the audience, this is what I'm going to talk about, and you'll know when I get there, and then you'll know when we're done. Yeah? And it also helps you, the speaker, know what your purpose is. If these are the 2 things, or if these are the 3 things that I've told my audience I'm going to talk about, I shouldn't talk about anything else. This is the purpose of the speech. Anything outside of that, it doesn't belong. It might be fabulous. It might be interesting and entertaining, but it doesn't belong. And that will help keep us focused. And if you are focused, your audience will pay attention. Right? All right. Any questions about the introduction? Now, what's really interesting about the introduction is most of you, when you have written a speech of any kind, you probably started with the introduction. How many of you do that? Yeah. Guess what? You're not supposed to. You're supposed to start with the body first, so you know what the speech is about, so you know what you're introducing. I know, that was free too. The second part of the speech, there's a fill in the blanks here, is the body. Is the body. And this is the crux of what you're talking about. If you previewed your speech, I'm going to talk about Open Doors Ministries, and I'm going to talk about a specific church in China, then the first main point in the body of your speech should be about Open Doors Ministry. Pretty simple. And you should have a nice, strong thesis. So when I tell you about Open Doors Ministry, this is what I'm talking about. Another thesis, so they know what you're talking about. Otherwise, what's the point, right? So you have a thesis for each main point. Oh, and that's your next fill in the blank. Each main point has a specific thesis statement. Many of you grew up taking classes in English and grammar and writing and maybe even a public speaking class, and you have learned that a thesis statement, if you've learned it at all, is just any kind of statement that tells what's coming next. It can be a question, it can be an exclamatory kind of phrase. I'm going to tell you, for beginning public speakers, not so much. Keep it simple for yourself. Make it a single declarative phrase. And that means make it a phrase that ends in a period. Don't ask questions, because if I say, so how do you feel about public speaking? Bad. Okay, done, right? So you can use rhetorical questions all you want later, but as you begin to develop your public speaking skills, give yourself every opportunity to take control of the conversation. Single declarative sentences, end in a period. Once you tell us what that main point is about, then you can give us any kind of supporting material. If you have statistics, Open Doors Ministry was started by Brother Andrew in the 50s, in 1955, right? That would be a subpoint. Another subpoint would be why. Another subpoint about Open Doors Ministry would be, what have they done since 1955 to 2012? How have we grown? Another subpoint might be, how many churches support persecuted Christians? Right? So anything that you have that adds to that thesis statement goes under it. Make some sense? Are we good? Okay. Then you would go on to your next strong thesis statement. Now that you know about Open Doors Ministry, let me give you a specific about a church in China. Right? That's a thesis statement. Now you know that I've changed topics. You know what the new topic is. And then you give me any information about that church in China. Fair enough? Okay. Do we have another thing? Use specific mind. And the third section is the conclusion. Now, I think I saw that there are 3 pastors in here. So I have an ulterior motive for what I'm going to say, in hopes that you will talk to my pastor. Pastors are some of the most amazing offenders of conclusions ever. I didn't even get one amen. Are we not charismatic? I would have expected a couple amens if for no one else, the wives of the pastor. Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Paul. We were such good friends just a minute ago. You should see the look he's giving me. The conclusion, and here is my beef with pastors. Probably not you guys. They'll say something like, I'm going to wrap up now. You know what that tells me? It tells me 10 minutes. We do an altar call every Sunday at my church. We're going to ask people if they need Jesus. We're going to pray for them. We're going to sing one more song, and then I'm going to lunch. I am a person who likes my lunch. And when he doesn't wrap it up, I become hostile. And while I am odd, and I admit it willingly, I'm not the only one who gets hostile. When you tell people, I'm done, what should you be? Done. One more time. When you tell people you're done, you should be done. Done. So a conclusion serves a couple of important parts. Parts is not the right word. Functions. Purposes. There you go. A conclusion serves a couple of important purposes. It should restate. The introduction tells us what you're going to tell us. The body tells us, and the conclusion tells us what you told us. So you're going to restate your thesis statement. Am I in the right order?
Yes.
Oh, look at me. I am so good. So you're going to tell them, hey, today I talked to you about Open Doors Ministry. I talked to you about the history of Open Doors Ministry, and I talked to you about that specific church in China. That's called reviewing your main points. Now, where a lot of public speakers then fail in their conclusion is they go, but what I forgot to tell you was, or let me add something, or you know what, there's also these people in Uganda. Does it belong in the conclusion? Do you know why? Oh, say that nice and loud. It wasn't in the body or in the introduction. And so while it might be fascinating and important information, it does not belong in your conclusion. Now, what I find a lot of public speakers do is they've got this story or this anecdote or this information that didn't quite fit in their speech. So as they're wrapping it up, they tell you, and you are confused. Because they didn't tell you that they were going to tell you that. And if I'm in your audience, I'm hostile. And I'm going to tell you, you almost never want your audience hostile. Right? Because you're bridge builders, not bridge destroyers. Hostile audiences don't help you. They leave angry and bitter because they're hungry. Oh, that might just be me. Right? So only put in the conclusion what was already in the speech. Okay? Do I have any more blanks for you to fill in here? So you remind them of the thesis and what you talked about. If you have a call to action, so we'd really like you to consider partnering with Open Doors. That's your call to action. No more. You're not going to spend 5 more minutes, especially if your pastor only gives you 3 minutes to talk. Right? So consider partnering with us, and then close with some kind of impact. Right? If your attention getter was a story, you might end the story. You might say, I started with a story. That 17-year-old boy who got me interested in persecuted Christians. He ended up going to nationals with that speech and delivering it in front of people from home schools of all 50 states. 17 years old. Right? That would be maybe how I would end that story. Bookend it. Right? That also serves to remind you of what I opened with. If you told a joke, which I don't know if you tell jokes when you're talking about the persecuted church. I probably would. But I'm odd. So we've rented that. If you started with a joke, you might repeat the punchline. If you started with a rhetorical question, you might answer it. So those of you who answered no, you knew nothing about the persecuted church. Now you know. Knowledge is power. What are you going to do with it? And then you're done. Make sense? Okay. Here's something you can put in your notes. In a good speech, your introduction and your conclusion is no more than 10 or 15% of the time that you have to speak. If you're given 5 minutes to speak, that means your introduction is less than a minute. Right? And your conclusion should be less than that. 5 to 10% of your speaking time. So your conclusion is 30 seconds, 45. This is why you write your body first. People who write their introductions first get very committed to them. And then they won't take anything out. And then they run out of time. Because they've got a 3-minute introduction, which means they don't get to tell us about Open Doors or the persecuted church because they've got an introduction and a conclusion. Right? The body is where you spend your time. That's what you develop. That's the information. Make sense? Okay. How many of you have ever written an outline? How many of you, when you have a speaking event, write an outline? How many of you are a little afraid of outlines? I love honest people. They remind me of me. Outlining is something that you should have for any speaking event you do. I will show you my outline for today. It's normally typed, but my printer, remember I told you I taught organizational communication? I lost the disc that connects my wireless printer to my computer, so I can't print. Because it's wireless, which is convenient until you lose the stuff that makes it communicate. So this is my outline. I've got a 1, a 2, a 3. I've got it color-coded because otherwise I have to wear reading glasses. And I'm just not really ready to commit to my reading glasses yet. But they're here just in case. And unfortunately, I typed some stuff and sent it to them so they could help me be reasonable. But I always have an outline of some sort, right? How many of you How many of you have a business card on you? Do you know you can write your outline on the back of a business card? What does your outline absolutely have to have on it? Actually, no.
An introduction of
Actually, no. If you're nervous about speaking, yes. But if you just want to stay on track, you know what your outline needs to say on it? Introduction, body, conclusion. To remind you what you're talking about. If you need a little bit more than that, introduction, opening story about 17-year-old, thesis statement, preview of main points, body, history of open doors, church in China, conclusion, see introduction. All of that will fit on a business card. Now, you might need your reading glasses to see it. And if you write like I do, even then the reading glasses won't help you. But you can do outlining in any way that works for you, as long as they include an intro, body, and conclusion. How many times do you think I've repeated introduction, body, and conclusion? 10. Trying to count. He's trying to do an acronym over here. He was truly, yeah. I'm going to guess at about a dozen times. Why would I say it a dozen times?
You're trying to reinforce it.
dozen times what?
But I've said introduction, body, and conclusion.
You don't want us to forget.
I've told you what I wanted to tell you. This is what goes in an outline. Then I told you again. And then I told you what I told you. And there will be a test. All right? You can put as much information as you feel you need in an introduction, in an outline. I would hesitate to tell you to put a word-for-word script on an outline. Why do you think I'm telling you I wouldn't want you to put every word that you want to say?
Because you need to connect with your audience, and by making eye contact, and you need to, everything that you have on paper is just there for a reference.
It's just there for a reference, right? I showed you my notes. How full were they? I'm talking for a lot of hours. I've got 4 pages. You're like, she's talking for hours? Yes, I am. I am absolutely. I'm taking every minute they gave me. And I'm a little bit mean-spirited. I might keep you 10 minutes long. That's what I do to my freshmen. They think class ends at this time, and I hold them. And if anyone dare put a pen away before I'm ready for them to, I keep talking. And then I tell them, and that's going to be on the test. It never is, because I can't remember, but they don't know that. All right. Writing a conclusion. See, now I have to turn pages. The reason why, are you Nathan?
Yes.
I was right. Names are so difficult for me. The reason why I would hesitate to tell you to put a full script on an outline and take it up for a speaking situation is because how many of you would get nervous speaking in front of people? Even those of you who like speaking and you're fairly accomplished, how many of you get a little bit nervous? I hate to tell you this, you're all normal. See, odd to me is a compliment. Normal is just, that's everyone, but you're normal. Most everyone, it's in the 90-some-odd% of people have some anxiety or nervousness before they get up to speak. But if you have every word that you want to say right in front of you and you let those nerves get a hold of you, you're going to read. And that's boring. And you don't connect with your audience, and then they get hostile. And then you're not building bridges, right? So you want enough on that outline that if you have a complete and utter brain freeze, I already had one, and I do this for a living, right? I just went, where am I? I had an outline. Oh, there I am. I remember. Moving on. Now this tells you something about public speaking. It means unless you're really super duper good at it, you can't wing it. You got to know what you're talking about. Right? We're going to talk about speech anxiety after the break, but let me tell you that the best way to deal with speech anxiety or nervousness is to practice and practice and practice some more. All right? Let's talk a little bit about something that maybe you've never thought about, and that's the idea of your audience. How many of you even consider the audience when you get up to speak? Well done. You. What's your name?
Donna.
Donna. What do you think about the audience?
I think about attention span. I think about
0.
I'm also very concerned about overloading them with facts, and I'm concerned about making the message too heavy so that they walk away depressed instead of encouraged or interested.
Okay, excellent. Someone else said that they thought about the audience before they spoke. Jason.
I'm mostly thinking of my job, but I'm an engineer, and I frequently have to present to non-technical people.
Me.
So, it's important for me to think of what my audience already knows so that I can connect to them from that point and tell them what they need to know.
Exactly. Brilliant. Anyone else think about your audience? Pastor
Dave,
Pastor Dave.
I want to help them. So I've prepared, for example, in my context, a passage of scripture for encouragement. And when I stand up there, I genuinely want them to be encouraged about what I say.
Excellent. You should get an encouragement for that. Excellent. Orange shirt is Vicky.
I'm worried about that they want to go eat. No, but seriously, what is really going to be foremost on their mind?
Excellent.
To speak? Is it getting out the door? Is it something? Because when you're using your hook, what is it that they're going to really care about?
Excellent. And if Pastor has given you the last 2 minutes before the altar call, before the last song, you better start with, I know you're hungry and I'm only going to take 2 minutes.
Right.
And they will love you.
If you take 2 minutes.
Well, yeah. Because audiences are like 2-year-olds. Sometimes the only thing that they remember is where you lied to them. Right? Oh yeah, we're going to leave in 5 minutes. 2-year-olds can't tell time, but they know when 5 minutes is up and they know that you have just told them a fib. Right? I can't read your card.
Calethea.
Calethea? Oh, pretty.
Thank you. To make sure after I'm done, when service is over, wherever I'm speaking, whatever my engagement is, that when they get in the car, when they get home, it's still resonating with them. And they take notes.
I like them to take notes too. I like them to take notes too.
Remember, 15, 20 minutes later.
And Calethea will be more likely to do that if she cares about what they hear, if she understands the constraints, if she understands that if you lie to them, they will treat you like an angry, hostile 2-year-old, right? You guys are very, very smart people, which makes my job so easy, which is going to be very hard for me to hold you late today. Let me tell you a little story. How many of you are soda drinkers? Do you drink soda? Do I have any Coke drinkers? Oh. It would have to be you. There was no other option but for it to be you. How many of us are old enough to remember? You and me. I read about this in a history book. Did I tell you that I lie?
No, but
all the time. I often remember to tell you that I was lying, but not till the point has been made. Back in the 80s, when we were being thought about being born, some of them are small lies, some of them are whoppers. Back in the 80s, how many of you remember Coca-Cola came out with the new Coke? What did you say?
The new classic.
They came out with the new Coke.
New Coke.
They came out with the new Coke. They did no audience. Oh, no, they did. They did tons of audience market research, blind taste tests. And in blind taste tests, I can do this. Blind taste tests in malls, in businesses, people preferred the new Coke. They loved the new Coke. So Coke changed its formula. And Coke drinkers rebelled in throes. In 1 week, I think it was a week, after they came out with the new Coke, without asking their clients, without asking their customers, without talking to the audience, when they reformulated Coke, even though all the research said it was a better product, people threw a hissy fit. And they called Coca-Cola in the thousands. Now, how many of you have ever been so frustrated at a product that you bothered to call? There are 3 of us who will stand up for our rights. The rest of you just sit at dinner bitter about it. It doesn't go away. You just... My pastor would say at this point, be better, not bitter. I will say, as a person who doesn't mind a good, healthy argument, and I've got more words than anyone, call them. Call them and tell. I'm getting ready to call my local mall because they've got all these kiosks in the middle of the mall with people who accost me. And now when I have agoraphobia, I can't do it. So now when I go shopping, I have to do this so I don't make eye contact, because I'm also a fairly nice, polite person. So when you look at me, I smile at you. And then they grab me and want to sell me stuff I don't want. So I'm going to call my mall. But only 3 of us call when we're unhappy with a product. There are 30 of you in here. Companies understand that if Karen is willing to call, she's speaking for about 600 people. So if 1,000 people call, they can assume that about 6,000 customers are unhappy. If 10,000 people call, that's 60,000. Coca-Cola had to change its product back to the old Coke. That was worse. It was not a better product because the audience got upset. The audience wasn't consulted. The audience was invested in Coca-Cola, the product. Coca-Cola changed it. They got mad. It cost Coke billions of dollars. You got to know your audience. And here are some of the things that you need to know about your audience. Everything that people in this room already said about thinking about your audience, knowing about your audience, all of that is absolutely true. But you also need to know some practical issues, like how big is the audience, right? When Carrie told me there'd be about 30 people here, 30 people, I can handle that without a microphone. I just have this nice big voice, right? But if I were talking to 300 people, even though I'm not a big fan of using a microphone, I would have to. Which means I would have to know how to use a microphone, right? So you need to know the size. You need to know how old your audience is. And I'm not saying walk around and ask what year people are born, because you're just going to get a bunch of people lying to you. So add 10 years. But why would it be important to know if your audience average age was 50 or your audience average age was 25? Why would it be important to know that?
Different issues.
Different issues, different frames of reference, different pop culture issues, right?
That's pretty much what I was going to say. If you use an illustration and they won't be able to relate to it at all.
Right.
It's like Coke in the 80s that we're all don't understand that.
Right.
Read it in history books.
Well, that's where I found it. Well, we know one person understands about Coca-Cola, right? But if you're dealing with if your church is all 50 and older with a few young people, you're going to use language and stories. You're going to dress a certain way. You're going to speak a certain way because the culture is different, right? You need to, and someone already said this, the engineer said this. You need to know how much your audience already knows about the topic, right? Carrie and mine's first conversation, I assumed you knew nothing. Second meeting, I was told, oh no, they know something. They need a more advanced discussion. So I changed it. Does that make sense? So if your church is already very involved with persecuted Christians, you're going to have to know more. You're going to have to give them more. Because it's really hard on an audience when you are seen, you're up on the stage, you are up in front of them, you are supposed to be the expert, and they know more than you. You lose credibility. So you need to know what your audience knows. You need to know their education level. Are you talking to college-educated folks? Are you talking to a bunch of 18-year-old homemakers? Right? And I'm not saying, and I have the letters behind my name, so let me tell you this. Some of the most educated people I know are not smart. Some people who never finished high school are brilliant. So education is one of those. Understand your audience. Are they capable of critical thinking? Do they not? Right? If you're talking to a bunch of PhDs, let me tell you, they're going to want you to use big words so that they can impress themselves that they know what you're talking about. The epistemology of the persecuted church began in... The only one who cares about a word like epistemology is a PhD. And only because they have a PhD. Right? So understand the education because they're going to have certain expectations for you. Know the gender, right? This is a mixed group. If it were all women, I would be using a few different examples. Which sometimes I use in front of men also, just to get the looks, right? Sometimes it's fun to make the audience uncomfortable. If it's all men, if you're speaking to a men's group, hey man, right? You're gonna speak to them differently than you would speak to them if it's husbands and wives. If they're single, it's different than if they're married. Not because it's better or worse, right or wrong. It's just people are different. And you need to know who your audience is so that you can tailor your message so that they can hear it. How many of you have laughed in the last hour? Do you know that I cannot tell a joke? You have laughed out loud from your bellies. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound. And I have not told one joke. I have told you things that you know. I have made some strange faces. I have picked on this poor woman who doesn't deserve it, but I want it noted for the record, Paul did it first. Did you give her a mint? Thank you. I should give you a mint too. Where are my mints? And because you are kind. But I know who my audience is because I've never met you folks. But Carrie told me that you're bridge builders. It tells me that you're people who care about other people, right? It also tells me that you're probably not 14 because 14-year-olds are incredibly selfish. And they are busy doing soccer and boys and girls and school and boys and girls and girls and boys. But I assumed certain things about you. I assumed that you were a lot like me. Odd. That you loved the Lord. That you were committed to a cause. I knew how many there would be. I assumed that you would be various economic differences, various educational differences. Some of you are probably single, some of you are probably married. Some of you live in Orange, others of you live in Wyoming, and you like gloves.
Yeah.
Paul likes gloves.
It's cold in Wyoming.
It's cold. It's cold in them there hills. But even though I don't know you, I know you enough to be able to relate to you. Does that make sense? And even though you won't know your audience, you can know enough to know how to relate to them. And let me tell you, being a little bit likable will cover a multitude of sins.
That's right.
If you are racked with nervousness and reading off of a script and don't engage in your audience, you won't give them the opportunity to engage with you. Okay? So know your audience. Care about your audience. Why does your audience, in this instance, need to know about the persecuted church? Why do they need to know? That's not a rhetorical question. Why do they need to know? We want them to act.
We want them to pray.
That's an action. We want them to pray. Why do we want them to know about the persecuted church?
With knowledge comes responsibility.
With knowledge comes responsibility. We want our brothers and sisters in persecuted locations to know that somebody cares. And we want to give our brothers and sisters here the opportunity to care. With knowledge comes responsibility. You don't know until you know. And the church in America needs to know that we are a spoiled, pudgy,
Can we tell them that?
little group, sleepy, ineffective group of people. And I say, yes, you can. In love. If you give them a cookie. But people need to know. They need to know for them, and they need to know for the thems they will never meet. Right? So you have to know your audience. You have to be able to connect with your audience. Now, you also need to know the room. Right? And most of you probably get up and speak in a church or speak in your church, or maybe you go to a high school or a home school or a private school. Where are the places that you speak? You help me here, because I really am not sure. Where do you speak?
Church.
Churches? Big churches?
Schools, small churches,
Small churches? Schools?
colleges,
Those are still schools? Colleges?
Lions Club,
Okay.
Missions conferences.
Missions conferences?
control them at work.
Say that again?
At work. Whole employees.
True. Especially if you're an engineer. Or what do you do?
Or water treatment plant operation.
Yes, they really have to speak to their employees. Tell me your name again. Darvis, who hates public speaking, just spoke publicly. He gets a mint. But Darvis also brings something up. I am speaking to you as though you're only speaking to a public group. Everything that I've just told you and everything that I will continue to tell you is true in your interpersonal one-on-one conversations. If you know your topic, if you tell them what the topic is, if you tell them the details and then tell them what you told them, if you tell them because they need to know, because you care about them and because you care about the cause, it really doesn't matter if your audience is 1 person or 1,000 people. The result, audience reception, is pretty similar. Does that make some sense to you? But if you're talking in a group of 30, in a Lions Club, or if you're talking in a mega church of 1,000, or a college assembly, or a high school assembly, you need to know something. This is still on with the audience analysis. You need to know something about the room. You need to know how many people are going to be there. Do you know that when you speak to larger crowds, you have to use more formal language than smaller crowds? Because smaller crowds, I can look at every single person's face and see if I still have your attention, if I've offended you, because then I'll apologize. Well, maybe. Depends on if it was really funny or really offensive. If it was really funny, I probably won't. If it's really offensive, I probably will. But a bigger crowd, you don't get to do that. So you have to err on the side of caution. A bigger crowd, you can't see if people are nodding or not, or falling asleep, or smaller crowds you can. Larger crowds, you have to worry about technology. Do I know what to do with a microphone? Is someone working it? Is there reverb? Is there sound? Is my body gesture enough? Is it too much? These are the things that we have to worry about. So you always want to know what the facilities are like. Right? You want to know what the facilities are capable of using. Do any of you use PowerPoints or other types of technology? A few of you? It's really important, if your presentation relies on PowerPoints, to know that, well, always practice with your PowerPoints first, please. But also you have to know that the facility can handle them. Right? If there's no screen or projector, then what are you going to do? Okay, everyone gather around my 13-inch Mac. I know you can't see it back there, but there's a graph, right? So you want to make sure that the facility has the capabilities for what you want to bring. And if it doesn't, you have to be adaptable. Fair enough? Any questions about audience analysis?
I just want to add one.
Yeah, please.
Culture.
Ooh.
Okay.
Do you want to explain or you want me to?
I'll be happy to.
Go ahead.
You can then correct what I said. Now, of course, when you speak, there's very likely going to be the possibility that there are people with different cultures that are going to be in the audience. And your terminology, your jokes, your teasing people, even to the point of asking questions and expecting an audience response does not fly in some cultures. Okay, because they don't have, you never call out an individual.
Sure.
Dress, mannerisms, all of that can play into knowing who's going to be there for what day.
Sure.
That's knowing your audience.
And that is knowing your audience. A culture isn't necessarily an ethnicity. In this room, we probably have at least a dozen or more cultures represented. Right? I'm taking some chances that our similarities outweigh our differences. Right? Now, if I were speaking, I used to live in Hawaii. That's where I met and abducted my husband and then got him to move back to I tell people I chased my husband till he caught me and then we moved back to California. My husband is Japanese and Hawaii is full of Hawaiian, Japanese, Chinese, Taiwan, very Asian culture, population. The Asian culture is far more what we would call collectivistic. We as Americans are far more individualistic. I know Hawaii is part of America. I remember that from history books. And my driver's license. But if I were speaking to a group of 30 Japanese people, trust me, the laughter would be more at me than with me. And there would be less laughter, right? And I would probably ask fewer questions. I would ask them to get less involved. I would expect less involvement from them. Not better, not worse, just different. So if you know your culture, if you know the culture of the audience, and you respect it, you build bridges, you don't destroy them. Yes? All right.